So you were able to see Jerusalem from the time of David, Solomon, Hezekiah, and finally the time of Nehemiah and Ezra. Now it's time to visit Jerusalem from the 1st century AD. This is the Jerusalem that Yeshua would have known. And arguably, this is the time when Jerusalem reached its architectural peak. So, we will begin our journey from the south to the Temple Mount. So, from this area here. This place is actually a huge archaeological park that you can visit yourself. Here you can see where it is located in reference to the Western Wall. When you enter this museum, you will be able to see huge stones that were thrown down from the Temple Mount on a 1st century street. Here, you can see exactly where this pile of huge stones is located. This is a witness to the tremendous destruction done by the Romans to Jerusalem. In AD 70, this magnificent structure was destroyed. But there's more things you can find in the Davidson's Archaeological Park. So let's take a closer look. They found 2 gates that would lead to the Temple Mount. These gates are the famous Hulda gates that the pilgrims would take to get in and get out of the temple from the south. But they not only found the gates, but also the stairs that would lead people towards the temple. So, can you imagine? These may be the very steps that Yeshua walked on when he went up the temple. Here you can see a reconstruction of this place, and you can see how it could have looked in the 1st century. Now let's move back to the view from the Mount of Olives. In the distance you can see the famous Golden Gate. We'll get back to the Golden Gate. From the Mount of Olives you have one of the most beautiful views of Jerusalem. But imagine how beautiful it was in the times of Yeshua. As Yeshua looked over Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives, he also wept because he understood the dramatic history that will happen soon to this beautiful city. At the bottom of Mount of Olives, next to the Church of Nations, there is a beautiful olive garden called the Garden of Gethsemane. Here, you will find some of the oldest trees in Jerusalem. Gethsemane is the Greek name of the garden, and it derives from the Aramaic Gatsmane, meaning oil press. It is very symbolic that Jesus spent his last moments before his arrest in this garden, because he was experiencing a great agony in this place. And you can say he was crushed as an olive. Now let's talk about the Golden Gate. So let's have a closer look at the Golden Gate. The gate is sealed and you can approach it from both sides. The Temple Mount side, which is from the western side and the inside of the gate, and from the east. You can go there from the Lion's Gate through the Muslim cemetery. So here you can see me walking up to the Golden Gate. So why is this gate sealed and why is there a cemetery in front of it? The Golden Gate was ultimately shut in 1541 by Ottoman Sultan Suleiman. However, it is not the first time that the gate was shut closed. It was also shut closed in 1810, also by the Muslims. Then it was reopened in 1102 by the Crusaders. And then again sealed up by the Sultan of Egypt, Saladin. The gate itself is a mosaic of history, and some parts of it go back to the First Temple period. Front of the gate, and this is what we see when we look at it today, is from the Turkish times, but beneath it there are some parts that are from the First and Second Temple period. On this drawing done by Lynn Rittmeyer, you can see a staircase. It is in orange. This is from the Herodian times. Today you can't see what is under this Golden Gate, but in 1969, Dr. James Fleming, an archaeologist, dug into the Golden Gate and found an arch underneath it. Here's my reconstruction of the Second Temple and the Golden Gate. Do you see a staircase on my model? This is the staircase that Dr. James Fleming found under the modern Golden Gate. And so the Golden Gate today is rested on ancient foundations. But that's not all. Around the Golden Gate, we can even find parts that are even older than the Herodian staircase. Inside the Golden Gate, there are ancient beams that go back to the First Temple period. Also, around the Golden Gate, there are stones that date back to the First Temple. Amazing. Do you know what this means? This means that this gate is located where the original Golden Gate was built. Some even argue that this gate, the stones around it, date back to the original Temple of Solomon. So the gate goes way back, but it also has a very important prophetic significance. You see, the book of Ezekiel records very important information concerning the Golden Gate. The prophet records that when Israel departed from the Lord, God also departed from them, leaving Jerusalem through the Eastern Gate. The prophet, however, also writes that in the future, when a new temple will be built, something amazing will happen. The glory of God will return, entering through the Eastern Gate. And remember the river going through the Mount of Olives into the Dead Sea? This is when it's going to happen. And it's going to transform the whole region into something amazing. There will be life coming out from Jerusalem through a river that will be transforming everything to life. An amazing future, isn't it? Continue our journey of the ancient Jerusalem. If you go through the Lion's Gate, on your right you will see the possible location of the pools of Bethesda. So let's move from the Mount of Olives to the pools of Bethesda. Walking alongside the Lion's Gate, you need to turn right to enter the complex of the archaeological site where the pools have been found. In the Bible, this is the place where an invalid man was healed by Yeshua. Today, next to the pool is the Church of Saint Anne and also many ruins that surround the area. Although we associate the pools of Bethesda with the ministry of Yeshua in the 1st century, the pools actually have a very ancient history, going back to the reign of King Hezekiah, who builds here an ancient cistern to gather the water for the First Temple. The pools were located very close to the Temple Mount, and there was also a gate called the Sheep Gate that led directly to the temple. It is significant that those pools are close to the Temple Mount, because we read in the Bible that the Jewish leaders are very angry with Yeshua that he makes this miracle on Sabbath. Later on, Yeshua meets this man that was healed in the temple, and he tells him not to sin again. Only then he announces that it is Yeshua who has healed him. Now, let's move west to the Temple Mount to visit a very important place. You could say one of the most important places in Jerusalem, and that is the place of crucifixion and burial of Yeshua, Golgotha. If you visit Jerusalem today, what may shock you is that there are two places where potentially the crucifixion of Christ happened. One place is the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, where most Christians, particularly Roman Catholics and Eastern Orthodox, have traditionally accepted this site as the location of Golgotha. But there is also an alternative site outside the city walls and north of the Damascus Gate, called the Garden Tomb. Here on a modern map, you can see where the two places are located. And here you can see where those places would be located on a 3D model of Jerusalem from the 1st century. Now, if you would like to learn more about the history of those two places, I have an episode on the Israel My channel where I go deep into details as to which location is most probably the location of Yeshua's crucifixion. The last place we will visit today is Herod's palace. Why there? Well, because it is most likely that in Herod's palace the trial of Yeshua happened before his crucifixion and death. Now, as you can imagine, Herod, who built the great temple, created also a magnificent palace for himself. Just to give you some orientation, Herod's palace would be next to today's Tower of David. Many believe that the Tower of David is the remains of the great three towers that Herod built. According to Josephus, these towers stood at the northwest corner of Jerusalem and protected the city, as well as Herod's palace that was built to the immediate south. The archaeologist Hillel Geva has shown conclusively that the Herodian Tower in the Citadel Museum is the Hippicus Tower. Now, you may know that the traditional place of Yeshua trial was often located at the Antonia Fortress, which is located next to today's Via della Rosa. It is more likely, however, that the Roman procurator, such as Pontius Pilate, would have chosen a more luxurious place to live and work, such as the Herod's palace. Therefore, it is more likely that the trial of Yeshua took place here and not at the Antonia Fortress. Thank you for your attention. I hope this episode gives you a better understanding of the topography of Jerusalem and also how the places of the Bible could have looked. Now friends, you probably recognize that recently I've been occupied with the updates from Israel, but I also wanted to create something connected to the Bible because those are the roots of this channel, and I want to continue as long as God allows me to create content that is important to understanding the Bible. Thank you everybody for your support and prayers for Israel. This is very important and I'm extremely grateful for that. If you would like to support the channel,